I think it's a good idea to go back to, again, one of the first shows I did. In fact, it was only the second one I did, where, I mean, I don't have an archive. Okay, I do actually, and I'm sure if you listen to this show, you've probably seen it, or if you've looked for it at least. But I do have a YouTube channel where I've reposted segments of the show, and I did repost a segment on this, but that was months ago, man. I'm not going all the way back to find it, but I believe I predicted this exact scenario that I did not predict that within a year that he would be removed from office, or within a certain period of time he would absolutely be removed from office. But I did predict that there would be serious discussions about it very, very soon into his speakership, at least in terms of how long a speakership can last. I predicted within less than a year there would be some sort of talk of removing him from office. Well, I guess I'd say try more like the beginning of the year, or what was it, 3 months? 3 months that he got to be speaker before there was any sort of discussion, if even that. I don't really remember. It was something like this. Was all so long ago. I don't know. I mean, no one's keeping track of all this. I don't think there's any record of it in the Congress. But anyway, I'm going to take my bragging rights on that now, that there would be some sort of discussion that he would be removed. Although, honestly, I mean, was anyone surprised by that? I don't really think, I guess I'm not exclusive in having been able to predict that. But anyway, so going through this, I believe kind of discussion started when Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I don't think it needs any introduction, um, made some statements regarding the removal of Johnson, and I thought that was especially interesting because she apparently, and this is something I forgot about because I just assumed it had to be the other way around, but she opposed McCarthy's ouster from the speakership, and that was weird to me because yes, okay, the vast majority of Republicans voted for Kevin McCarthy to stay in office. I know this whole removal of Kevin McCarthy was seen as Republican inspired. To be fair, I mean, while it was inspired by them, the majority of them did vote for him to keep his seat as speaker. So maybe it shouldn't be surprising because of that, but I just assumed the people who were removing Kevin McCarthy were the furthest right of the party. I mean, let's just be honest. So I kind of just assumed she was with them. I never looked at the exact names, but no, I guess not. But apparently she opposed McCarthy's ouster, but now is making comments about removing Johnson. So I don't know, like maybe she's not considered within the right of the party anymore. But she is threatened to remove Johnson, and this is for if he would vote to back a Senate border deal that includes additional military aid to Ukraine. So she said that apparently this is grounds to remove him. Now, this is older news, so I'm just going to be honest. This issue may have been resolved. I'm not keeping super updated with this. I write this stuff down when I hear it, and we do it for the show. But I doubt that. I mean, whether or not this is resolved, it is undeniable that she did make comments that would hypothetically support his ouster. So, I mean, really, there's probably very little feelings that on Johnson that she has that have tempered it all since that incident. So it's still not impossible. And then another Republican, actually, Representative Chip Roy of Texas, who's a member of the Freedom Caucus, which is the group of people who wanted McCarthy removed, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I don't know if all of them were members, but they are. There were. It is kind of a thing that the Freedom Caucus, I believe, is the more conservative, further right caucus that would want Kevin McCarthy removed. He said on the Steve Deese show, which I have never heard of, but at the same time, I'm sure he hasn't heard of me, so I guess, that's something we both have in common. But he said the option is on the table. That's his quote, and it's taken from NBC News, where I saw it. I didn't see it on the Steve Deese show, I mean, I never watched that. And again, he probably has never heard of me either, so that's not any sort of insult towards him. But, the funny thing is, if this vote took place, any sort of removal vote from Mike Johnson, which is possible. I mean, if you remember, that was not exclusive to Kevin McCarthy. Mike Johnson is under the same treatment too. That if this vote took place, which, and I've said before again, I believe more now. I believe more now is very possible to happen. He may be saved, and I can't say for sure, but he may be saved by Democrats because, and then this is again from another source that I read, NBC News once again. So that's why I'm quoting here a senior moderate House Democrat, and I quote them as that instead of their name because I believe they'd rather stay anonymous or just not give their name, which is their choice, I guess, said, quote, I probably would support Johnson. We can't do another 3-week standstill. As it is, we've got nothing done in the 118th Congress. And that's the end of his quote. And then again, he says, I would be very surprised if there are a number of Democrats who support Johnson. So this kind of shows a few things, which is, I think, first of all, it's good that, he acknowledges what we've all seen, which is that really what has happened during the 118th Congress. I mean, if we're going to think about it for a second, and I know that it's the joke. It didn't start, January 2023 when this Congress started. It's been the joke for a while that nothing happens in government. Congress takes forever to pass anything. I know that's the whole joke. This didn't start then. But I mean, think about it. What can you remember from this Congress? The 10 days where Kevin McCarthy wasn't getting confirmed as Speaker. What is it that Kevin McCarthy got removed as Speaker? That they're trying to impeach Biden. What do you remember from this Congress? Really, is there any significant legislation that passed that we should think about or remember? No, I mean, if anyone could dispute that, then I'd like to hear it. But no, there's nothing. And so I'm glad that he acknowledges that. I don't know how many members of Congress would want to acknowledge it, considering they're part of the problem. Technically, they're the ones not passing anything. I'm not going to necessarily say whoever this guy is or woman or whoever it is responsible for these problems. But I'm just saying, they're in Congress and they've seen all this. But I'm glad that someone's going to acknowledge that. But on the other hand, when talking about who said this, I'm not really surprised how it's a quote senior and quote moderate Democrat. Because I'm not really surprised they'd be the ones to advocate for saving Johnson, because I would say that a younger, more progressive Democrat out of the ones in Congress probably would not necessarily be on board with saying, and certainly wouldn't be on board with giving their name, although I know this person didn't give their name either. And, I'm not saying that's right or wrong or whatever, but I'm just putting that out there. It's not, I don't think it's surprising that someone who considers themselves a moderate. I mean, when there's a lot of people who say, both parties are pretty much the same, we don't have a lot of differences, which, I mean, I would disagree with that idea, but at the same time, there are a lot of people who think that someone who considers themselves a moderate of either party can be argued to be not fundamentally too different from the moderates of the other party. But, that's just me looking at this. What do I know about it? But I just feel like, someone who's a bit younger, more progressive Democrat probably wouldn't be so quick to vote to retain Mike Johnson as Speaker. And that's kind of the thing with this, which is I feel it's a bit of a cop-out to say that you'll save Johnson unconditionally. And I know it's a short statement for a news article about something that hasn't even happened yet. But if we're going to be talking about this hypothetically, it's you shouldn't say that you'll just save Mike Johnson without any discussion on it. Because if you remember back when Kevin McCarthy was being removed, there were many Democrats who were the Democrats voted unanimously against saving McCarthy. And apparently, I remember there was some sort of statement from Hakeem Jeffries about saving Kevin McCarthy. Well, we could have saved him. We could have voted to keep him in office, but he wouldn't make any concessions for what he'd do for us if we did. So we didn't. And I don't remember. I don't remember if it was either there were no conversations about it or they did have conversations with him about it and he just refused to do anything. But I mean, he was not saved because he wouldn't concede anything to the Democrats who would have been the ones to have had to have saved him. And I think that it's a bit of a cop-out to say, oh yeah, I'll just save him, without him conceding anything before these talks have even happened. Because let's say hypothetically that there is a motion to remove Mike Johnson from office brought to Congress, and the Republicans decide to do a similar thing as they did with Kevin McCarthy, and the vast majority of them are going to save him, but some of them aren't. So by that logic, if the Democrats have any sort of discussion with Johnson about saving him, then it's already just null and void, because we just know there are some Democrats who are just going to vote to keep him in office, and not for invalid reasons necessarily. I mean, I understand that we can't. I mean, he's right there. It would be ridiculous to have another month-long shutdown, but to remove that bargaining chip right away just doesn't seem wise to me. I think you might want to stay as close-lipped as possible about this and just say, well, we're not saying nothing about nothing until this actually comes to pass, and then we can get some things from him. And I'm not saying they will get anything from him, but at least they can talk about it. And so saying that you'll just save him unconditionally, I just think is that's just bad strategy, but what do I know? I'm not going to say it's right or wrong. Like I just said, I'm not going to tell them how to run things, but I'm just stating the facts, bad strategy, first of all. And then, of course, people would probably bring up that probably even if he made concessions, the majority of Democrats would still vote against saving Mike Johnson as Speaker. So really, what does this change? But at the same time, I feel like there would be some Republicans who would vote, if he made some concessions, that would vote against him now, just out of, well, now he's starting to concede things I don't want conceded, so I'm going to vote against him. That was kind of a problem I thought in mind with if Kevin McCarthy tried to save. I mean, if Kevin McCarthy negotiated with Democrats in an attempt to remain in office by Democrat votes. So again, it is pretty confusing when you think about it. But I feel like when you think about it as well, whoever would vote for you without any concessions, if you have enough votes from that alone, Like, for example, Kevin McCarthy, if it's true that he didn't even talk to the Democrats about conceding anything, he was unlikely to have the votes no matter what he did if he still didn't have the votes from that, because he could concede things to the Democrats, but I feel like anything he concedes, there's going to be an equal number of Republicans who will say, well, now I'm not voting for him anymore because he conceded that point. He conceded that point. So maybe the whole concessions thing is pointless, but I feel like whoever is the strategy from the Democrats at this point, who is forming the strategy from the Democrats in the House at this point, they really need to, get their act together. Don't tell them to be out there saying things like that. But then again, on the other hand, there are many Republicans who are saying they wouldn't vote to remove Johnson. So they're joining with, the senior moderate Democrats on that one. And I mean, again, it's not really surprising because the majority of Republicans voted to save Kevin McCarthy. So it's really not surprising that a lot of Republicans who they seem to like Johnson better, that they would say they would vote to save Johnson. An example would be Representative Bob Good of Virginia, who's actually the chairman of the Freedom Caucus. So, take that as you will, however you'll take it. Referred to the notion to remove Johnson as, quote, ridiculous superstition. And Good also voted to remove McCarthy, which I don't know if I made that clear enough with he's the chair of the Freedom Caucus. So I guess it's a bit weird to see the sides are switched, that those who voted to save McCarthy want to remove Johnson, while those who voted to remove McCarthy want to save Johnson. And maybe that's not that weird because you would think that, as I said, Johnson seems to be more liked among Republicans. I mean, I don't have a poll of that, but it's just that pretty much everyone who voted for McCarthy, in fact, I think everyone who voted to save McCarthy also voted to confirm Johnson, and then those who voted to remove McCarthy voted to confirm Johnson. So it's not surprising. But since it seems he's losing a few of those people, it's definitely possible. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen there? But at the same time, I think it's wrong to say, how could this be a ridiculous superstition when there are people in your party who want to remove Johnson? This wasn't brought up by the Democrats in terms of, they're not talking about bringing a vote to remove Johnson. And I don't even know, I'm not completely sure, but I don't even know if they can. I thought it was a Republican who had to bring the motion because he is a Republican. Although I don't really know if the House recognizes party politics like that to where only a Republican can vote to remove him. But still, it is possible that a Democrat could. But I feel like when Republicans are the ones bringing this up, you can't call it ridiculous superstition. It's your side that's flanking and talking about doing this and that. But rather unsurprisingly, though, there are a number of Democrats who said they will not vote to save Johnson if that comes up. And again, that shouldn't be surprising. If the majority of Republicans voted to save McCarthy and the majority of Democrats voted to remove McCarthy, then there's going to be a few people from each side who are planning to just do the same thing again if this vote comes again with a different person. And an example of that would be Representative Jerry Connolly of Virginia, or it could be Gary Connolly. A side rant here, but Gerry, we should just have a vote for how that's pronounced and just leave it at that, because I introduced a Jerry and the Pacemaker song. It's spelled that way, and I am about 90% sure it's pronounced Jerry and not Gary. I could be wrong. Maybe Jerry Connolly is pronounced the other way. I just out of a force of habit, I called him Jerry. It could be Gary. I don't know. But everyone, we need to find one way to spell that, or one way to pronounce that, and leave it at that. But anyway, Representative Gerry Connolly of Virginia said, quote, if we have another vote for a speaker, I'm voting for Hakeem Jeffries. I have no reservation, no doubt. And yeah, I mean, that's not surprising at all. And I didn't include the exact quote, but he did mention it was because of his views and his positions, which is unsurprising. I mean, why else are you going to vote for, if you're voting based on party, why else are you going to vote for anyone, for or against anyone besides just those reasons? So it makes sense. And I think that when I say earlier the whole comment about don't make any concessions, I don't think he needs to say if he is going to vote for Hakeem Jeffries, but at the same time that I would say the best strategy is just don't say who you're going to vote for, leave them in suspense, but whatever, I guess. But anyway, moving on from this, in my point of view, I don't want to say if Johnson should be removed from office. I mean, I'm not going to say whether or not he should be. I feel like removal from office just means nothing anymore in terms of politicians. I mean, unless you just straight up take them out. Like, for example, George Santos. I know I already said I wasn't going to talk about him, but, you got to break that sometime. But no one ever sticks to their resolutions, so I just broke mine. But George Santos was removed just by the House, and that was, of course, historic. That very rarely happens. And of course, removing the speaker, removing the president, that rarely happens. I mean, removing the president has never happened, at least in terms of removing them from office. But I know it's become so just, regular in this age, just removing everyone from office. But I will say, I don't think Johnson should be removed from office if just the allegations towards him are just that, he's doing a bipartisan deal, that is what Kevin McCarthy was removed from. So I'm not going to say whether or not we should stop that trend now, but I will say I'm not going to say whether or not he should be removed. Whatever. It's not my decision to make. I'm not a Republican in Congress, so I can't make that decision. But I will say I just think it's funny that already this discussion is taking place. I know I brought it up, but I predicted it'd be within, you know, a year, maybe by the 2024 elections, but not this fast. And I'll say that now this discussion is taking place, if the Republicans either lose the presidential election or lose the House elections, then, and frankly, it could happen without either. Maybe Trump can win in the presidency and the Republicans can keep the House. But no matter what happens, as long as if they lose one of those two things, 100%, he's not going to be renominated as the Republican leader in the House. And that is if he's still Speaker by then. I mean, I'll say frankly, I mean, I'll go further. I think that it's possible, even if they just win everything, they still won't renominate him. I mean, I'll say that while they may win everything and he'll at least stay in power for the moment, I think there's a good chance that he just won't have the votes. There will be Republicans who just turn against him, and he won't have the votes when it's time to renominate him as Speaker. Like that drama with Kevin McCarthy, I think that's very possible to happen again. And I think it 100% will happen again if the Republicans lose either of those things. I mean, I know we live in this age where in a presidential election, that's what's considered the big thing we're paying attention to. But it's possible that if Trump wins the election and then the Republicans still lose seats in the House, it is very possible. Well, first of all, if the Republicans will even have the votes to renominate Johnson as Speaker if they lose the House. But if they do lose the House, he just won't be renominated as minority leader. I just don't have any doubt about that. But it's something to look to see how this plays out, because I don't think I've ever seen a time where this many discussions of removing different people from office have taken place so close in time frame. But again, really, I'm not going to say that he should be removed from office. I'm not going to say that he shouldn't be removed from office. But the thing is, would I vote to save him if I was in Congress? I will say that I would not commit to saving him if I was in Congress right now for that same reason, because he has to come to me to make a deal. He has to come to the Democrats or whoever to make a deal that, hey, will you vote for me to retain me in office? I don't believe in this whole saying you'll just vote for him unconditionally. What's he going to, what are you going to get from it? I think that's the best way to do it. I think that saving him with no concessions, just no concessions on his part at all, is just, a dumb move. How else are you going to get anything from him? I mean, if you're in a house controlled by the other party, how else can you get anything? How else can you get anything from the House if the only way they'll vote on it is if you get some concessions from the person they're going to choose as Speaker? That's what I think. That's what I think they need to do, and I think that it's just good strategy. But I'm not in the House. What do I know? And I imagine that it's possible the reason that the senior moderate Democrat who spoke anonymously, or I guess I shouldn't say anonymously, and they gave some details about themselves, but they spoke namelessly, is because maybe that is the discussion happening behind closed doors right now, and they just don't want to. They don't want to say anything about if they'll save him or not, at least at this junction. And one person has made the decision that they will, and okay, well that's their decision. But I doubt that. I do doubt the majority of Democrats would vote to save him if it came to a vote, just because they didn't for McCarthy and Johnson, who's supposedly more conservative. Why would they save him this time? But I just feel like if the vote's going to be brought, it's not wrong. I remember there was all this discussion of when Kevin McCarthy was removed, it was the Democrats' fault because it was because of their votes he was removed. That is pretty much a fact. If more Democrats voted to save him, he would have been saved. But it's just because the Democrats voted as a bloc to remove him, and a few Republicans fell from the ranks to decide to vote for removal as well. It's because of that he was removed, and that it's the Democrats' fault for that. But no, that's not how it works, because they didn't bring the motion to vote to remove him. It was the Republicans who brought the motion to vote to remove him. So for me, it's not about voting to remove, it's just voting, do you want him to continue as Speaker, yes or no? And when it's brought to you, you have to vote. Do you want to let him continue as Speaker, yes or no? It's fine to say no. He's not owed anything from the people. They have to choose whether or not to vote for him, and if they decide not to because they just feel that they don't want to keep him as Speaker, that's their decision. So no, I don't think just because the vote is brought that he's owed anything. He's not owed anything. So I don't think any concessions should be made at this point. Or I don't think any decision should be made at this point without any concessions on his part. But anyway, because of this, I just feel the ultimate lesson taken from this. If it wasn't confirmed before, it just kind of shows now that, people in Congress have just kind of lost the ability to govern. And especially those at the top, because I'm not saying we need to create the society where they threaten the people below them and say, if you don't vote on my side every time, you're out of the party. But, I feel like it just shows that party leadership just doesn't know how to keep their party in line anymore. Because, what happened with McCarthy has created a trickle here, which has created a stream of speakers just being removed from office. And when will it end? I mean, I don't really know. I know that there's some people who think that if the Democrats control the House, they'll bring more stability or whatever, or that, they won't remove their speaker. And I'm not saying they will remove their speaker, but I'm just saying this isn't, I mean, yeah, we hear about it more with Republicans, but, this isn't a Republican exclusive thing. I mean, it's inevitable there will become a point where there's going to be a Democrat speaker and a Democrat in the House is going to want to bring a motion to vacate against them. Whether or not they can is going to depend on the concessions they have to make when they're being voted as speaker on January 3rd after the new Congress is sworn in. But, depending on how long America lasts, I guess, I mean, it's pretty much inevitable. One day this will happen, and we'll just have to see how the country gets through it then. But ultimately, I just thought I'd say this is all speculation. And frankly, when I was thinking about even talking about this as a subject, I believe there was more discussion then about removing Johnson from office now. It's not that it's disintegrated completely since then, but I do believe it's discussed less now. So, maybe he got saved. Maybe he's in the clear. Good for him, if that's the case. But we're just going to have to wait and see. And I will say, I'm going to bring this back to where it started. I'm waiting for my $20 that someone owes me that I predicted this would happen. If anyone would like to send it over, then give me a call. And I'm just owed it from someone. I mean, again, I'm not a genius for figuring that out, but I wasn't hearing anyone else say it. I was the only one I heard say it. So I would like my money, and I'd like it dealed out in two $10 bills specifically. So someone send that over to me because they owe me. But we'll be getting off of that now. We'll be going to the next discussion portion later on in the program. But first, we're going to go back to the music for a little bit. Maybe in about a half hour or so, we'll go to the